Bonjour à tous. Je vais dire seulement deux choses en français avant de mon présentation. La première, c'est que je suis très ravi d'être ici. La deuxième, c'est que je vais faire cette présentation en anglais parce que je ne me fais pas entendre toute votre langue. Alors, après ça, I want to talk to you about the general subject of sensible cities, and I want to tease you a little bit with some examples that we have been working at our office and at the MIT, and I will explain a little bit about that later on. So in order to talk about that, I want to go back a little bit to the 90s when George Gilder said this about cities. So what would happen with cities in the future when connectivity would be all around? So basically, there was an idea that if we were all connected and that we could work from everywhere in the world, we wouldn't need anymore to meet people. So we could just cease to meet in cities, and cities would be the leftover baggage of the Industrial Revolution, basically. What we see that happen actually is quite a different thing. Cities are every time more and more important. We can say it in a city like Paris. But basically, from 2008, we reach a moment in life that is very important, that is more than 50% of the population in the world lives in cities. And this number keeps increasing on, and it will be around 5 billion by 2030. By 2050, it's going to be around 70% of the population, and this is something that makes us think about what technology is doing to our cities. So what we see is that the digital didn't kill the physical, but it didn't leave it unchanged either. So what we see now is a mix between the digital and physical, and they're almost becoming one. So it's like every atom will become a bit, and every bit will become an atom. So what we think about this is that every atom can become a sensor and can sense what is happening in the cities, what is happening with citizens, and respond accordingly. So cities, in order to be smart, that is a term that we don't like very much. We prefer the term sensible because then, as it was being said before, they're sensing what is happening to people. They can at the same time respond to their needs in real time. This is a little bit about who we are. So we're basically a design and innovation firm that is based in Turin with offices in New York and London. But we're also led by Carlo Ratti, as the name might suggest, that is a professor at MIT where he leads a laboratory that is called the Senseable City Lab. So basically the Sensible City Lab takes care of research on what digital technologies are influencing our cities, on the way that they're doing it. And what we do at Carlo Ratti Society is taking this high-level research and making it into more concrete projects that I would like to show you now after this. I'm going to focus a little bit. I know that the general subject is commerce and retail, but I will go a little bit over more of the challenges that we have discuss during the day and show you something about three themes. So basically how we work, how we buy, and how we move around the cities. And then maybe an application of how this could look in the city of the future. I think you have this covered here in France already, but in any case, I will show you some examples that we have done in Italy. Let's start with work. So as I was saying, if work is digital, why do we still go to the office? So basically, the office is a place where we go to exchange ideas. It's not anymore the place where we go and be sitting close in a cubicle, but it's the place in which we can have more of an intellectual contamination with other peers. So I want to show you an example of what this can mean. The Agnelli Foundation, as you may know, the Agnelli is the family that owns FCA, so Fiat, and this is a very important thing in Turin where we're from. So it's a good place to start on the new ways of working. They had this old villa in the center of Turin where they had their foundation and had a whole space that they didn't know what to do with. So we started with a project that basically meant to bring new uses to it, and we partnered with TAG, that is Talent Garden, the largest co-working office in Europe. What we had the idea here is, what if the building where you go to work starts responding to the needs that you have. So we partner also with Siemens and made an app with which you can control everything that you do in the building. The first things that you can control is how you enter and how you use the different spaces that you have access to. So as a person in the co-working space, you can, for example, schedule a meeting room or schedule a place where you can put your laptop and work in it. You do this through the app, and at the same time, all the usage data feeds back to Talent Garden, and they can optimize how they use the space. And then what you can do that it goes beyond that, that is pretty much a standard function of new management systems, is that you can create your own comfort zone within the building. So basically you can control your own temperature and create almost a bubble of heat that will follow you around wherever in the building you are. And you can control the lighting, that it's also a pretty comfortable thing to have your own lighting wherever you're sitting in the building. Let's think about how we buy. So basically, what happens if we rethink the experience of the supermarket? And this is something that we were thinking about when we did this installation that we did with Coop, that is the largest supermarket chain in Italy. For the Expo 2015 in Milan, we did an installation for them that we call the Supermarket of the Future. And in order to understand how the supermarket of the future is, we started by reevaluating two different things. So the first thing is how you go and shop, so the experience that you have as a person when you go shopping, and how the supermarket works from a, let's say, logistics point of view. So what you can see here is the section of the building. On one hand, we remove all the aisles that are the things that you may feel like more of a supermarket, of what makes a supermarket. So instead of having people trapped between long aisles, we left the view open and returned to what could be the experience of a traditional market. So bringing the produce to the table and having an experience that goes with seeing other people that is buying as well. And on the other hand, we were rethinking about how to refill all the shelves in the supermarket done in an automatized way with robots from underground. This proved to be more difficult in the application because, as you know, in many of old cities in Europe, it's hard to put things underground, but it's still a good dream to have for the places where we can have it. What we did in this case was rethink the experience in a digital way, and every time that you go near to a product and you touch it, the screen will tell you information that is not normally displayed on the label or that is not normally easy to know about a product. So for example, if you pick an apple, you can see where it was produced, maybe see a picture of the farmer that produced it, see how much CO2 was emitted in bringing that apple into the supermarket, or simply seeing a nutritional fact that you cannot see about a vegetable or milk or so on and so forth. This is a little bit of what we think that the future might look like of buying, and it's an experiment that we're trying to keep moving around with them in Milan. For the last part, I want to talk about how we move around our cities. So this is an experiment that started with an analysis on start-end matrix of share rights. Basically, when you start analyzing how we move around the city and how people move in single cars, you start noticing that a lot of the paths that people take are overlapping one to another. We started this analysis and we realized that we could optimize the way that these trips were done if people would start sharing cabs. This initial experiment, this was a research that was done at the MIT, was the origin of what is nowadays Uber Pool. From then on, we started working in an algorithm in order to understand how this could move forward, and we published this article in Nature last year. And I wanted to show you just a short video on what could happen if we try optimizing the taxi fleet in New York. What you can see in here is data that was actually taken from Bloomberg so it's real data in New York on origin destination trips of taxis. And the whole idea of this is, if we reduce the number of cabs that are going around in New York by optimizing their trips, or maybe by sharing them, we can reduce the number of cars that are in the city effectively. At the same time, if we reduce the number of cars, we can reduce traffic and we can make life a little bit better for people. As we can see, it's a big reduction if we optimize all these things. So this is a little bit of what we can do when we start analyzing the data that is around the city. And I want to show you another example of what can be done if we start rethinking the way that we use our roads. This is an example that we did in Canada for the Toronto Quayside. This is a project that was led by Google. Now it's a little bit less popular than it used to be. But this is a very interesting experiment that we did in rethinking what could happen if the street is no longer fixed by cars. So this was a subject that was brought earlier by Jean-Louis Misica, and I think it's very pertinent. What happens is the street starts responding to the needs of the day and to the needs of the people. So the experiment that we tried to do here was a modular street that changes. For example, if in the morning there is a rush hour, we can have it all with car lanes to optimize traffic. But at 11, where no more traffic is there, we can have it as a pedestrian road or as a bike path. So the idea of it is that you can have sensors around the city that can track in real time how traffic is going and adapt the street to the real needs of the people. What can happen there is that streets come back to the people, and we can have, for example, a market in the evening, or a street party that is happening on a weekend when no cars are going through it. This is a little bit of what we thought about doing also here in Paris. We were participating recently in a competition about the périphérique that was earlier mentioned. And the whole idea was to think about if this same concept could be applicable to the streets of Paris, and how we can not only couple these dynamic streets with the normal Parisian life, but also with multimodality and some of the other subjects that were mentioned here before, coupling it with bikes, coupling it with autonomous vehicles. For the last part, I just want, this is a little bit of how it looked. It was a very low fidelity prototype that we did in Toronto and was in show last summer. Unfortunately, it's no longer there, but we're happy to try and put this in one of your cities now. For the last part, I would just want to mention a little bit of an application of all these things that I've been talking about in a project. This is the Milan Innovation District, and this is the regeneration of the area of the expo in Milan of what was done in 2015. So basically, this was an area that was left abandoned, as it usually happens with expo areas, and we planned a mixed-use development that will have a common ground, that is what we call an area in which this contamination of different cultures can happen by having, for example, people in the area, or industries in the area will be innovation, biotechnology, pharmaceuticals, hospitals. The University of Milan will go there, and other companies are starting to slowly join the whole mass of the building. What we see here is that we took the infrastructure that was existing already from the project, took the long Cardos and Decumanos that was the planning for the Expo 2015, and use it as the main structure for the new plan. The idea with this was to reuse all the infrastructure that was already there into making it a new piece of the city that will attract people from the center of Milan and make a new pole of innovation here that can share basically new ideas with the city. With that being said, this had the first neighborhood that was planned for autonomous vehicles, and we'll see how that will work in later for autonomous vehicles in Europe. And we'll see how that will later play on when it starts getting built. And with that being said, I'm gonna leave you just with a small reflection, that is that urban tech, so all the technology that goes around cities, is now the biggest investment above pharma and biotech. So the investment in cities is at the most important point than ever. Thank you very much.
Thank you.